Welcome back, my friends, to the Dime Store Cinema, where we talk movies and culture. Today, I'm joined by my friend Michter Smallbatch. This is actually the first time I ever had Michter's, and I'm pleasantly surprised. It's a very fine bourbon. Do you remember when music defined you? When metal coursed through your veins and you'd say things like cunt, and it was cool and funny. You name your garage band something like Corpse Fucker 2000 and you thought it was edgy. Yeah, I'm glad no longer living through those days. Today we're going to talk about the 2022 movie recently released called Metal Lords. And to start out, I do have to let you know it is probably one of the most mediocre movies I've ever seen. But there are a few things that really stood out to me that I wanted to talk about a little. This movie stood out to me and kind of spoke to me a little bit because I grew up very much wanting to be part of the punk scene. Very much like the music, was all about the middle finger attitude. Very much was opposed to the status quo and wanted to stick it to the man, as it were. I even was a part of a garage punk band for a little while, and yeah, so this movie it is about that. It's about high school students forming a metal band, and it all hinges on the battle of the bands. And that itself spoke to me because one of the big things that my band was looking forward to was a battle of the bands before we lost our drummer and life happened, as it were. So there were so many things that I saw in this movie that reminded me somewhat of myself, but a lot of what I saw. So the movie centers around two friends, one of whom is very much trying to adopt and live by the standards of metal as he sees them. The other is, for the most part, along for the ride. He gets more into it as he starts to learn the drums and starts really enjoying participating in that level. He enjoys the actual production of the music more so than the other gentleman who is about the lifestyle. And anyone who's about the lifestyle in high school is there's going to be some cringe involved. I know this from personal experience, but then also this movie does a very good job of representing this high school student with delusions of grandeur and an ethic developed through this genre of music. The music by which he seems to derive this path, as it were, all of which leading to repercussions for his actions, leading to I don't want to say hero's journey, because that's definitely not what it is, but it is a journey of self-discovery, we'll say that, leading to realizing the necessity of not holding to a hard and fast path, but instead allowing yourself to cooperate in a community of diverse people. Not everyone has to be as metal as you. And that was a very fun progression. This movie had absolutely no stakes whatsoever. There were no real villains. There was a bully of sorts, a jock, as one can, if they were ever in any particular scene, can understand that the butting of heads there, the constant struggle between the meatheads and the metalheads and the punk rockers and the straight edge kids and the scene kids and the emo kids. There were just so many factions in high school. I'm so glad to be out of that mess. I'd say the one thing that was fortunate in my regard is that I was never steadfast in any one of them. I got along with pretty much everyone, which was very beneficial, because I got to see all sides of things. The one person, the character that would have normally been the villain, was actually probably the nicest person in the entire movie. The rival band. The rival band was comprised of really nice, chill guys. They made very bland, generic music, but it had a nice beat and people just enjoyed it. But they were all solid guys and there was no conflict there. And I thought that was a nice subversion from the norm that you see in these high school movies. And that's one of the things that I liked about this movie, despite it being inconsequential. I liked the fact that it actually displayed how insignificant most issues in high school are, while simultaneously showing the depth of meaning they had to the characters. This is something you don't typically see in high school movies. Most high school movies treat the drama as if it's the most important thing in the world. And that's how high schoolers feel. They feel that their struggles through developing themselves and discovering themselves is the center of the universe. And for the most part, as people grow and they experience the world, they realize how small of a part that they are in this whole collective of everything. A lot of that self aggrandizing slips away. Now, not with everyone. There are still self-centered assholes out there, and sure. But for the most part, as you grow and you realize how insignificant you are, and I say that not in a demeaning way, but in a realistic way. We need to realize that we are simultaneously invaluable and also valueless. I mean, in a sense, we are invaluable in the sense of our potential. We are potentially the catalyst by which all things become better, and we are potentially the catalyst by which all things either stagnate or get worse. So we're constantly wrestling with that potential in ourselves. But within that, you kind of find your place, typically as you get older, if you are genuinely trying to develop yourself. Whereas in high school, you automatically see yourself as the center of not just your universe, but the universe. And I like how that was portrayed here, because it very much has that element to it, but it takes it presents it in a way that is detached, and the audience can see just how kind of ridiculous this is. Now it uses metal for this, because particularly when you're thinking, or when you're using death metal, it's a very easy extreme to exploit for that means. Much easier than using the winning high school game that is often the trope in high school movies. Because for whatever reason, people still put stock in that for, I don't know, whatever. In this sense, they just used a catalyst by which it would be easier to point out the banality of life, as it were. So I appreciated that, and with doing that, they really they subverted a lot of expectations while making a completely bland and unoffensive, well, it depends on your sensibilities, but relatively unoffensive movie. You know, there's not really any conflict other than internal conflict and getting to the battle of the bands. That's what it's about, finding that third member and getting to the battle of the bands. And speaking of the finding the third member, that was probably the more interesting aspect of the movie, incorporating a cello player into metal music. And I really liked this touch because the only Metallica album I've ever listened to that I've enjoyed was actually not released by Metallica. It was a cover. It was an all-cello cover of a Metallica album. And that was so much better than Metallica, and was far superior to anything that they ever released. And if you're a Metallica fan, I'm sorry, I can't stand them. I find them to be awful. And I derive no pleasure from their music other than when it's played by a bunch of cellists, apparently. So I thought that was a lot of fun, introducing that. And then there were the conflict of, you know, the one trying to live by the metal ethic, saying that it's not metal enough. And then, of course, the other who's more interested in the music itself, saying that, no, this actually pairs really well and we need a third person, and I like this person and we should let them join. So that was you know, a fun dynamic, as opposed to them just searching for a member. There was actually a conflict of the idea of music itself and what is within a genre, and what works with subverting expectations of genre. And that was, personally, and this is even in high school and throughout my entire life, this is one of the reasons why I've always liked jazz, and one of the reasons why I've always liked punk rock, is because there is a lot of that idea of subverting expectation. It's flirting with the line of the understood, while trying to change or add to the expectation in a way that kind of flips it on its ear. So, you know, with jazz, you have the underlying flow, the underlying rhythm, but then you have tangential flourishing, if you will. And then with punk rock, there's a lot of playing with the expected lyrics and making them much rougher around the edges, playing with with major and minor chords, all of that. So that's why those genres of music always kind of spoke to me. And there was some indie music that was a lot like that too. Stuff like Dropkick Murphys, where they're adding bagpipes to punk music, stuff like that. Always really like that. So I enjoyed that aspect of the movie where they're kind of toying with the idea of keeping the genre pure, as it were, and as pure as any high school trio can keep any form of music, but adding a different element to it, which makes it unique. Which, you know, when you're a band, at least when I was in a band, you know, wanting to find that something that made you stand out among the crowd, or finding that uniqueness, was always a big part, particularly when I was in high school, even more so when I was in high school. It was all about the uniqueness. It was all about the singularity of yourself and your music. And I thought that they kind of they played with that notion of being true to yourself and submitting to an expectation, as well as living up to an understood expectation. So there was a little bit of toying with that. It wasn't the primary focus, but there was a little bit of that if you kind of look below the surface. Another thing that I thought was interesting is the female character in it, played by let's see, Isis Hainsworth, rather. Apologize. I enjoyed this character because it was the manic pixie dream girl that was so popular in the early 2000s, only presented as that type of person would actually be in real life. And what I mean by that is that she had a very singular look to her. She wasn't traditionally pretty. She wasn't ugly. Her clothing was very frumpy, but unique to her character. Also, the manicness was it wasn't a character choice, but rather a medical condition, leading to the realness of that character type, making her far more interesting and believable than what we got in all of those movies. I guess gone are the days of people pretending to be the manic pixie dream girl, and instead we are now presented with someone who is that way through no fault of her own, but through a medical condition. And I thought that was a nice play on that character type. I thought that it was more enjoyable, and it wasn't that she was just quirky. She had medication she had to take to prevent herself from freaking out on others. I enjoyed that touch, and it was also nice to see that it appeared, and I'm not 100% sure, but it very much appeared that the characters were actually playing their own instruments, and that is always enjoyable to see in movies and in shows when people can actually play those themselves. There were some cutaways to close-ups, which I'm sure they needed some help, but there was at least some competence there where they're able to play their own instruments. So once again, this is a thoroughly mediocre movie, but I really wanted to talk about it just because of that connection to the high school experience that I think is so much more accurately captured in this movie than in most movies. Now, I would say that most movies dealing with high schoolers, it is from the high schooler's perspective. So because of that, the drama is heightened as a high schooler would heighten their own experience. Whereas this movie, everything is played off as if we are a third party standing back just observing. So we're able to observe and enjoy the ludicrous nature of what is going on. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought it was fun. Don't go searching this movie out to see an amazing film. But if you were a scene kid in high school, if you're into punk rock, if you're into metal, if you were into emo, any of that in high school, and you've since grown up, if you still enjoy the music, even if you don't still enjoy the music, but if you have fond memories of being involved in that, I think you'll enjoy this movie because there's a lot of archetypes in this movie that you can see, and you'll recognize them from your life. It'll be very nostalgic in remembering those archetypes that have been in your life if you've had anything to do with these kind of things. And because of that, I think it's kind of fun. So or if you're older and if you had teenagers that went through that phase or went through enjoying that type of that scene, then I think you might get a kick out of it too. but it was fun and nostalgic for me. Just like I said, being able to see those archetypes again, and being able to look through it through a lens of the absurd and non-consequential um, lens of one looking back at high school. So for that, it's worth a view. Um, my only real complaint, and it's a nitpick, you take this for what it's worth, is it is very predictable, extremely predictable. But so is high school life. It's You spend all of your time thinking that you're the center of the universe, thinking that every choice you make is singular and wildly unique and wildly your own. But as you look back, you realize that you're basically acting and behaving and doing all of the exact same things that every single group of people has experienced and done and chosen throughout all of Western history. So, yeah, if you look at it in those terms, the predictability is predictable because it's about a group of people that is primarily predictable. And if you're in high school and you find that to be offensive, I apologize, but just know that for the most part, the choices you make while you're in high school will help you develop into something that you either want to be or don't want to be. So choose wisely what you want to do. Choose wisely the actions you make. Choose wisely the experiences you choose to have. Because at that point in your life, you're just getting to the point where you are starting to discover what your potential is. And all of us have the potential to make this world a better place or make it a worse place. So focus on that. Don't focus on the world being centered around you. Don't focus on the universe being you-centric. Focus on what can you do to develop your potential to have the best impact. That's it. All right. Thank you once again, my friends. This has been Justin C. Bartlett with the Dime Store Cinema, reminding you all to fill your lives with amazing stories.